We are roughly 6 months away from the 2024 Copa America to be hosted in the United States of America with the inclusion of 6 CONCACAF nations. If we made the best US men's national team roster right now, it would likely be easy to come up with 23 names. But what if we projected into the future and tried to predict who will make it to the US men's national team Copa America roster to be played in the summer of 2024? Things would get a bit more complicated then. Not too much more complicated because we're only 6 months away, but it would be different from the best roster right now if we tried to project into the future. And today, that's what we're going to try to do. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV, and welcome to another Copa America video. And for this one, we're going to try to project or predict what Berhalter will do. What roster will he bring to the 2024 Copa America? I will also be giving you my ideal starting 11 based on this roster that I'm about to make up for the group stage matches, even though it's far too early for that. What are you looking at? We ran out of ideas. So along with the roster, I'm also going to make up a starting 11. We got to keep the content going somehow. But before we start, let me give you some quick assumptions that I will be making. I will assume it'll be a 23-man roster for the Copa America. Also, injuries I can't predict, but I can project based on the player's current status if he'll be available or not. And I'm pretty sure most of them should be, and probably some of them won't be. But it's pretty hard to predict that, and I'm not going to try to predict anyone getting injured because I just don't want to do that. And again, this video will be predicting what Berhalter would do, not what I would do. Take that into account before you hate on me. And of course, I don't know what Greg Berhalter will do. You don't know what Greg Berhalter will do. BJ Callahan doesn't know what Greg Berhalter will do. And surprisingly, Greg Berhalter doesn't know what Greg Berhalter will do. And this video is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, but more on that later. Let's begin. So let's start with the goalkeepers, and I think Greg Berhalter will bring 3 of them. Actually, I don't think. I am certain of the amount of goalkeepers he will bring. It'll be 3. Let me give you the names right away. These are the 3 that I think he'll bring to the 2024 Copa America. Matt Turner from Nottingham Forest, no-brainer. He is our number 1. Then you have Drake Callender from Inter Miami, and Patrick Schultz that plays for the Columbus Crew, the 22-year-old goalkeeper that literally just won MLS Cup. Yes, I think Greg will bring him. I'll explain in a second. Let's start by talking about Ethan Horvath and Zach Steffen. So Horvath ain't playing at all, and he might be back in MLS this January. I think he'll be in MLS this January. Zach Steffen is still injured at Manchester City, and he's expected to also return to MLS in 2024 to play for the Colorado Rapids. Nothing against the Rapids, but, I don't know, man. Not a great team. So I think it's safe to say that Patrick Schultz, a 22-year-old goalkeeper that just had a very good season for the Columbus Crew and won MLS Cup, would not be too crazy for him to make the roster as the number 3 goalkeeper, the 3rd goalkeeper. But here's the thing. That excludes Gabriel Sonina. I doubt Greg Berhalter would bring 2 very young goalkeepers as the backups. Plus, I think Sonina will be in the Olympic roster instead. I don't think we'll see many players on both rosters this summer. Maybe 1 or 2, but I don't think many of them will make it to the Copa America roster and the Olympic roster. So since he won't bring 2 young goalkeepers, it's probably between Drake Callender, Ethan Horvath, and Zach Steffen. Zach Steffen, hasn't been there for a long time, injured. He's not making the roster. I don't think there's enough time for him to bounce back in his career. So it's mainly between Ethan Horvath and Drake Callender. So I don't know. I just think if I try to project into the future in terms of stability and playing time, I have to put Drake Callender there, and I think he'll be the option. So again, I'm going to say it again. It's going to be Matt Turner, Drake Callender, and Patrick Schultz, in my personal opinion. Again, this is mostly a bunch of calculated guesses. I'm also not a big Ethan Horvath and Zach Steffen believer, so that's why I didn't really include them. Next up are the fullbacks, and I'm going to go with 4 fullbacks. I understand that in the World Cup, Greg Berhalter, for some stupid, idiotic reason, brought 5 fullbacks, and I don't really have an issue with him bringing 5 fullbacks. My issue with the World Cup was he brought 4 right backs and 1 left back. Like, he literally brought 4 right backs to the World Cup. I don't know why. We had Yedlin, Scally, Dest, and Shaquille Moore. But skipping on the World Cup, let's talk about the Copa America, and I think the players he will bring, or the 4 fullbacks he'll bring, are Serginho Dest from PSV, Joe Scally from Borussia Mönchengladbach, A-Rob from Fulham, and then as of now, I think he'll bring Christopher Lund from Palermo because, I mean, this guy's been in Berhalter's rosters, you know, ever since he came back. I also don't think Caleb Wiley will develop on time. That is a very promising left back that we have for the United States in the future. Sam Vines is always injured and struggling in Europe. George Bello, who knows what happened there? I don't actually even know where George Bello is right now. So honestly, the main options Greg Berhalter would have for the fourth fullback would be Christopher Lund, which I think it's the one he will bring based on the data we have now. John Token from the New York Red Bulls, very good left back that had a very good season in New York. Daejuan Jones from the New England Revolution, also a good option. And then, believe it or not, Austin Trusty that plays for Sheffield in the Premier League, he can also play as a left back, but he's mostly a center back. Based on the data we currently have with Berhalter in recent call-ups, I would have to say Lund is the option. Keep in mind, Token might be one of the closest ones to Christopher Lund in Greg Berhalter's list, even ahead of Daejuan Jones. But Token might be moving to Europe soon, and we don't know if he'll perform right away, if he'll get benched. So if we're going to go with the safe option for this video, let's just go with Christopher Lund from Palermo. But here's a good question for you. Who would you bring as the fourth fullback or the second left back or maybe another right back, because Joe Scally and Des can't play left back if A-Rob can't go. Now, before we continue, I forgot to ask you, please smash the like button. Let's try to hit 500, 700, 800, whatever amount of likes we can in this specific video. But before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, because they will be adding the Copa America to their app in the summer of 2024, and I'll be playing it during the Copa America. But quick word from our sponsor. I'll be back in a minute. And thank you, Underdog Fantasy, for sponsoring Tactical Manager TV. Underdog Fantasy is a fun game to play prior to any soccer match, or basketball, or football as well, but we don't talk about those two in Tactical Manager TV. Sometimes basketball during live watch-alongs. I have been playing Underdog Fantasy for over a year now. You can download the app by using the link on the description of this video, and you can also use the promo code TMTV. And Underdog will be matching your first deposit for up to $100. And in the process, you'll be helping the channel avoid bankruptcy. The game I mainly play is called Pick'em. You just click on it, scroll to the soccer section, and pick a player for a specific match and select the stats that you believe will be lower or higher. It's very easy to play, but be smart about your picks because it's not easy to win. I'll be playing some Underdog Fantasy during some match live streams or match live watch-alongs, so stay tuned for that, as I will be forced to cheer for a player or root against him. Now, I am a professional hater, so I'll probably be rooting for the player's downfall. Once again, don't forget to use the promo code TMTV and use the link on the description of this video. Thank you, Underdog Fantasy, for sponsoring the channel. Hey, you're back? Okay, so now let's talk about the center backs, and I think Greg will bring 4 of them. And they are Tim Ream from Fulham, Cameron Carter-Vickers from Celtic, Chris Richards from Crystal Palace, and John Brooks from Hoffenheim. I'm joking. I am 100% joking. He's not bringing John Brooks, okay? Don't dream about it. It ain't happening with Greg Berhalter. I think he'll bring Austin Trusty from Sheffield United. Let me explain. You see, I think Berhalter will want another left-footed center back since Ream might not be with the US men's national team for much longer after the Copa America. And we know Greg Berhalter won't bring John Brooks, a left-footed center back. I doubt any other young center back will emerge in the next few months, so I think he'll bring a left-footed center back that has played all season long in the English Premier League, even though he'll likely be a second division player by the summer because, I mean, come on, let's just be realistic about it. Trusty has been fine, but Sheffield will get relegated. Regardless, he will have that 1 year in the Premier League of experience, and maybe he'll be back in the Premier League soon. Other options that Greg would have right there would be Miles Robinson, but since he's about to get a transfer this winter, we don't know how that's going to play out, right? We don't know where Miles is going to play, if he's going to be a starter, if he's going to be getting consistent minutes. And also, Miles wasn't really good for Atlanta this season. So personally, if that trend continues, I think he'll be phased out of the national team sooner rather than later, regardless of where he's playing. But we got to wait and see. He might be heading to Europe. He might stay in MLS. We don't know at the time of this recording. Another option would be Mark McKenzie, maybe. I doubt it. I would say there's a chance Greg would bring Walker Zimmerman since Greg loves him, but he hasn't been calling Walker Zimmerman lately on these camps that we just had in 2023. One camp was due to injury, but the other ones were simply Berhalter's choice to not bring him. One option that can also play center back is Leonard Maloney, that plays in the Bundesliga, but he's utilized by Heidenheim as a 6 in Germany, and Greg Berhalter also sees him as a 6. So again, the center backs that I think he will bring would be Cameron Carter-Vickers from Celtic, Tim Ream from Fulham, Chris Richards from Crystal Palace, and Austin Trusty from Sheffield United. So now let's move on to the midfielders, which I think he will bring 6 midfielders. And you know what? Coming up with this list was actually a lot easier than I expected. So let's go through the names. Weston McKennie from Juventus, Yunus Musa from Milan, Gio Reyna from Borussia Dortmund. Yes, Greg does list him as a midfielder these days. Tyler Adams from Bournemouth, and I believe Tyler will be healthy by then. Johnny Cardoso from Real Betis, and Malik Tillman from PSV. So I want to say this, Tyler Adams is expected to be back from injury in March, which would give him more than enough time to be fully fit by mid-June. And if he's fit, there's absolutely no way Greg Berhalter leaves him out of the roster, and I don't think he should be out of the roster. He should absolutely be there. Now, going through that list, Weston McKennie's an obvious pick. As long as he's healthy, he'll be there. Yunus Musa as well. Gio Reyna the same. Malik Tillman, I fully expected as well. So the other one that's a question here is between Johnny Cardoso and Luca De La Torre. Personally, I think he'll bring Johnny because he can actually play the 6 very well alongside Tyler, right? They can interchange, or maybe Johnny by then could even replace Tyler if Tyler's not fully fit. But here's the thing about Johnny. He will be playing for Real Betis, and he's expected to get a lot of minutes early on from what I have heard. If he's playing well in La Liga, why can't he start for the United States men's national team? Why can't he be an option? Real Betis is also a better team than Celta de Vigo, and I think for what this roster would need, Luca De La Torre is more of an 8, Johnny's more of a 6. So the only 2 6s in this roster would be Johnny and Tyler. So Luca would be competing with McKennie and Musa, and he's not going ahead of McKennie and Musa because Gio Reyna and Tillman would be the more attacking 8s. So what I'm trying to say is Tillman and Reyna are for one position, Musa and McKennie are for the 8, and then Johnny and Tyler are for the 6. So Luca will be competing with Musa and McKennie, and he's not getting ahead of them. So I think Luca De La Torre might not make the roster. So outside of the 6 players I just mentioned, the other 2 options that I think are ahead of everyone else in Berhalter's list would be Leonard Maloney and Luca De La Torre. So if there are 2 injuries, those would be the 2 that would probably be called in, Maloney and Luca De La Torre. Now, if we have more than 2 injuries in that midfield, we're screwed. Now let's go to the wingers. And for some freaking reason, I think Berhalter will only bring 3 wingers. 2 of them are obvious. Christian Pulisic and Tim Weah will be there if healthy. The other one would be Brendan Aronson from Union Berlin. By then, he won't be at Union Berlin anymore. I'll explain why Brendan is here. Yeah, there's a lot of people talking about how he should be dropped from the national team, and I sort of agree with them, but let me explain why I think Berhalter will bring him. So, once again, keep in mind, the wingers, this was a bit of a tricky one, the third winger. But let's start with the 2 easy ones. And the 2 easy ones, as I said, are Pulisic and Weah. They're locks in the roster. Not only in the roster, but they're locks to start. These are our 2 starting wingers. But then, I would normally expect Greg Berhalter to bring 4 wingers instead of 3. However, 2 of the midfielders can play on the wing. Malik Tillman and Gio Reyna. And also, out of the 3 center forwards that I will list later in this video, 2 of them can play out wide if needed. On top of all of that, we have seen Greg experiment with 2 players up top, more specifically Balogun and Pepe. So I think he might want to bring 3 center forwards, and a little bit of versatility in this roster will be needed. And I know Greg won't do this, but Dest, McKennie, Musa, they can all play out wide if needed. We've seen that for their clubs. By out wide, I mean like a winger or as a right midfielder. Even Dest. We've seen Dest play as a winger for Barcelona. We've seen McKennie play as a right midfielder, more or less. Sometimes he looks like a right winger for Juventus. And obviously Yunus Musa, we've seen him play out wide for Valencia and for Milan. So even those players could go there if needed. That's another reason why I think we're only going to bring 3 wingers. Probably not, but let me try to guess it. Okay, so let's go through of why I think Brendan Aronson will be there despite his downfall. It's just that Greg loves Brendan Aronson. He works hard, he presses, and you know, all that crap that kept Paul Riola in the roster for so long. And keep in mind, Brendan is far better than Paul Riola, but for the same reasons that Ariola stayed in the roster for so long, I think Brendan will stay there for a long time, unless Brendan Aronson bounces back, right? We know he has the talent. He's not just a hustle merchant, but that's kind of like what he's been for like, I'd say like 14 to 15 months. That's a long time, actually. That's a pretty damn long time. But other options he could call up ahead of Brendan would be Kevin Paredes, that is on the rise, but not fully ready yet. Alejandro Zendejas, that's an okay player, maybe a little bit more technical than Brendan Aronson, but not as much of a hustle merchant, so I think Greg would prioritize Aronson. You have also Taylor Booth, that's been struggling quite a bit for Utrecht, so I doubt he'll make it there. And then maybe Paxton Aronson. He's talented, but he's also not ready for the U.S. men's national team. He's actually a little bit far from ready for the senior team. Look, we're trying to predict what Greg will do, and knowing Greg, regardless of his form, assuming the poor run continues as well, it's going to be Brendan Aronson. The next in line, in my opinion, of that list that I just mentioned, would be Paredes or Zendejas. Likely being Alejandro Zendejas. If he brings a fourth winger, I think the list would be Pulisic, Weah, Aronson, and Alejandro Zendejas. But I'm going to assume that he's only going to bring 3, and that would be the ones I listed: Pulisic, Weah, and Brendan Aronson. Again, this is a wild guess. Last but not least, before we go to the starting 11s of this roster, very quickly by the way, we have the center forwards, and I think he'll bring 3, as I already stated. And they are Fullerton Balogun from Monaco, Ricardo Pepi from PSV, and Josh Sargent from Norwich. This is what I believe. I believe Balogun and Pepi are locks. And Sargent is coming back from injury right now this December, along with the fact that he was off to a hot start in the English second division. Greg Berhalter also really likes Josh Sargent, and he can play as a center forward and he can play as a winger if needed. I don't think he'll bring Jesus. I don't think he'll bring Pifak, Haji Wright, DK. The 3 I mentioned seem to be far above all these other names of Jesus, Pifak, Haji Wright, DK, etc. So Pepi, Balogun, and Sargent are the 3 I would expect him to bring. If he was to cut one, it would probably be Josh Sargent at the moment, and then he would add a fourth winger that I already mentioned. It would probably be Alejandro Zendejas. So we're done with the roster. What lineups with these players, this set of players that I just mentioned, would I put out to face Panama, Bolivia, and Uruguay? And I know it's impossible to do this right now. We don't even know what players our opponents are going to bring, and we don't even know the players we're going to bring. But assuming these are the players, I'm going to give you 2 lineups. One to face Panama and Bolivia, where we're going to be the clear favorites, and another to face Uruguay, where we are not going to be the favorites. So let's start with Bolivia and Panama, because those are the 2 teams we're going to face first. We only face Uruguay in the 3rd game of the group stage. And to face Panama and Bolivia, I would go with a 4-2-3-1 formation with Turner on goal, Dest on the right back, and A-Rob as the left back. The 2 center backs I would place there would be Chris Richards and Tim Ream. 2 ball-playing defenders, 2 very technical defenders, because we're going to have a lot of possession. Then the double pivot in the 4-2-3-1 would be Musa and McKennie. I don't think we need to put any of the defensive-oriented midfielders like Johnny Cardoso and Tyler Adams for these specific opponents. Gio Reyna at the 10, Tim Weah on the right wing, Christian Pulisic on the left wing, and Balogun up top. Now let me quickly explain what my goal is with this lineup. One, right away, and I know some people will pick on me for this, but understand, we want to dominate possession against these lesser opponents. Don't give them the ball. We're the better side. Dominate possession. That's the first thing with this team. That's why I surrounded us with technical players, from center backs to midfielders, not many hustle merchants. That's the first thing. Essentially what I'm saying is play with 3 midfielders that are very good on the ball and goal dangerous. Musa not so much, but he's highly technical. And then Gio Reyna will be the playmaker. We also want to be dangerous on the flanks with the wingers and fullbacks providing width to open up space down the middle as well. I would also send Ricardo Pepi in at halftime if we are down or it's still 0-0, because when we're facing a low block, crossing is inevitable. Yes, expect a lot of crosses against opponents that will just bunker and play a low block, unfortunately. And as I said, I'm expecting a low block, especially against Bolivia, so in possession, just don't play narrow. Just simply don't do it. Have some width to create space and press them a lot. It's important to score as many goals as possible, as the group could be decided in a goal differential against Uruguay. Panama's a tough opponent, so that one we might struggle a bit, but Bolivia, while we play at home, should not be a match that we should be worried about. Seriously, when playing Bolivia, no altitude, no problem. It should be an easy win and we should score a ton of goals. And once again, I said press, lose the ball, gegenpress or counterpress, whatever you want to call it. Press the living crap out of them. We need to score a ton of goals in these 2 opponents. How would I set up, though, to face Uruguay? It's similar, but not quite. And understand, it's similar because it's the same formation, but in terms of phases of play, the way we behave, the way we position ourselves would be different. I'm not going to dive into different phases of play in this specific video, but again, it's going to be a 4-2-3-1 as well to face Uruguay, but a little bit different. Also, Uruguay normally also sets up in a 4-2-3-1. We could try to counter that by playing a 4-3-3. That would be one way to do it. But no. I'm going to go for 4-2-3-1. And let me explain how. So I would go with Turner on goal, Dest as the right back, A-Rob as the left back, Richards and Ream as the two center backs. And then my double pivot ahead of Richards and Ream, that's what I would change. I would have Tyler Adams and Johnny Cardoso. Yes, I would go full-on soccer terrorism to face Uruguay. I'm not joking. And then we would have Gio Reyna at the 10, Weah and Pulisic on the wings, and then Balogun. And the wingers and the center forward are going to be extremely important in this system because we're going to try to hit Uruguay in transition on the counterattack. And of course, this would depend on whether or not we need a draw or a win to go through in the group or to top the group. So for the sake of this video, I'm just going to assume this is a one-off match. And how would I behave if it was like a knockout round against Uruguay? But we could very well arrive in the last game only needing a draw against Uruguay, or we could arrive needing a win. And depending on those situations, we would have to behave differently. But if it was a one-off match, playoffs, we can tie it, take it to penalty kicks, or try to win it 1-0. This is the setup, and this is the goal and the strategy. I would essentially defend on a 4-4-1-1 mid-block with Balogun isolated up top and Gio Reyna as the 10 to connect and transition with speed. We would also want Gio to try to find Weah or Pulisic out wide in transition if Balogun was marked. Let Uruguay have the ball, let them take the initiative, make it hard for them. And then we strike in quick transitions, trying to find Balogun in his runs, and also if he's not available, you utilize Pulisic and Weah on the flanks if Balogun is marked. So very often it'll be route one football. We will play direct, sometimes with the center backs trying to go long or trying to find Gio Reyna to try to play make, but that's essentially what I would do. Oh, I want to make one thing clear. Do not try to play out of the back against Uruguay. Bielsa's men marking press would screw us over. They would create chaos, and it will probably get the US men's national team to lose. And I know Greg Berhalter is not watching this video, and I am not qualified to probably give him suggestions, or maybe I am. The one thing I'm begging him right now, or anyone from the coaching staff, is just don't try to play out of the back against Uruguay. I watch a lot of Uruguay in South America, and with the players we have, it would get us in trouble. And we know how Uruguay will set up with Bielsa, probably a 4-2-3-1, and they're going to do his man marking press. Murder ball that Bielsa loves so much. So don't try to play out of the back. I can't overemphasize this, and I'll continue to say it until we play Uruguay. I'm going to repeat this so often. And then just to close things out, obviously Johnny Cardoso and Tyler Adams would protect that back line quite well. Johnny has experience playing against South American teams, and Tyler Adams is a fantastic defender when playing as a 6, and so is Johnny. They're great defensive 6s, and that's the double pivot I would put to play Uruguay, not Panama and not Bolivia, obviously. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. How would you set up to face Uruguay and Bolivia, and what would be Greg Berhalter's roster in your opinion for the 2024 Copa America? Drop a like before you go. Thank you Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching, and have a great day.